안녕하세요 from Daegu, South Korea. Welcome to Cooking from Around the World with the Creative Contessa. I am the Creative Contessa, and I am coming to you live from Daegu if you're watching this as a live stream. So this is part of a new series that I am introducing that will become at least weekly, possibly more depending on how often I cook during the week, which has been getting less frequently, but will hopefully get more frequent as time goes on. So yeah, this will become a weekly series in which I will bring to you live cooking demonstrations of a variety of dishes. Good God, am I not smart enough for this apron? In which I will bring to you a demonstration of a variety of dishes that I have encountered in my world travels. And so today we're going to start in Korea, where I have spent a lot of time both living and traveling in the last 11 years. And so I have, of course, experienced a number of super tasty dishes that I fully plan to share with you. Normally this apron is not so challenging to put on, by the way. I don't know what the hell just went wrong. Okay, so audio is a-okay. Fantastic. Thank you, Susan. So we're going to, this is a multi-step recipe. Dalkgalbi is a marinated chicken stir fry, and it's called Dalkgalbi. Which if you use the Hangul, if you transliterated the Hangul would be D-A-L-K, but the L is kind of swallowed and silent. Dak means chicken and galbi means ribs. Now, some of you are probably going to say chicken, they don't really have rib meat. They don't, you are correct. But that's not the origin of this dish. So basically, the process today is going to be, I'm going to be preparing things, and as I prepare along, I will discuss things. So we're going to get right into it, and then I will discuss the history of Dalkgalbi as a dish, how it has come to be. And then, you know, as we go along, you're welcome to ask questions. If you're watching this as a recording, then feel free to pop your questions in the comment section and I will absolutely see them. Right, okay. So first off, the first thing we're going to be doing today is marinating our chicken, and I should get the chicken out of the fridge. The best cut of chicken for this dish is chicken thighs. Chicken breast is honestly, in my opinion, the saddest part of the chicken and the least interesting and the last part that I ever really want to use for most things, right? So chicken thighs are what you want. Now, some places do chicken thighs with the bone in because, one, it's cheaper to get chicken thighs with bone in. I personally just go straight for boneless chicken thighs, and we will leave the skin on because that will definitely be part of the flavor of this dish, right? So first thing we're going to do is we're going to make the marinade for our chicken, and we're going to marinate it. And then while the chicken is marinating, we will then move on to rice. I'm going to show you how to prepare rice the Korean way, which is not very different from other Asian ways in, say, China or Japan, right? So first step, marinate. So why are we marinating this dish? Marinating has a couple of functions. One, it helps draw out flavors from your flavor-giving ingredients and infusing them into your meat. Two, it can have a tenderizing effect if you're using the right components for your marinade. So for our marinade, we have a couple of very key ingredients. So first we have gochujang, and I had to go and buy a new one of these this morning. It's been so long since I cooked anything Korean that I ran out of gochujang and I didn't even know it. So gochujang is fermented pepper paste, fermented red chili pepper paste. Gochu is the Korean word for the chili peppers. Well, for chili peppers in general, it can be any kind of chili pepper, honestly. And basically this is a mixture of gochu with pepper powder, dried peppers, basically, a sweetener, in this case it's brown rice syrup, some rice powder, and some other flavor givers like ginger. And it's allowed to ferment in giant crocks for a relatively long amount of time. Longer is better. And then, you know, it's sold in these containers. Now, the best stuff is, you know, artisanal and much more expensive and sold in nice glass jars. But I don't have any kind of grocery store or any kind of store near me on a Sunday that is selling such a thing. So this gochujang means sauce, gochu means the chili pepper, can come in a variety of heats, right? And so you have a choice, hotter and less sweet or more sweet and less hot. This is more sweet and less hot. So I'll actually be using not as much of this because I don't want to add too much extra sweet to this dish. I've got something better for sweetening than what they use in here. Okay. So other, of course, key components of cooking in an Asian marinade of almost anywhere in Asia, honestly, we have ginger. And you'll notice this is a smaller and different kind of ginger than the stuff that you see from China. The smaller ginger roots like this are from Korea. The big giant ginger roots are from China. So, and of course, garlic, as always. And soy sauce, but this is a traditionally barrel fermented soy sauce from Japan that I bought in Japan and brought back with me to Korea. So it has a much deeper and much richer flavor profile than a lot of commercial soy sauces have. Even here in Korea, I mean, in Japan too, there are different grades of soy sauce. So this one is a really nice, rich one. And soy sauce contains glutamates, which are flavor enhancers. So it's not just the sodium itself, but the glutamates that are part of the soy sauce. That's umami. That's that umami flavor, that so-called savory flavor, right? The sixth flavor. Yeah. Yeah. Is this a hot dish? Yes, this is a spicy dish and it's a freshly cooked dish, but it's not. So Dalk Galbi can be spicy as you make it, or as not spicy as you make it. So you can adjust the spice level. Now, if you get rid of the gochujang entirely, then you're going to be getting rid of some other things other than just flavor, right? So the first thing I'm gonna do is go ahead and crush my garlic into a bowl so that we can make our marinade. I prefer, when possible, to work with as few bowls as possible, especially because we don't have a dishwasher in our vacation apartment, in our vacation rental. So yeah, definitely want as few dishes as possible. And yes, I'm using a garlic crusher. You know, some traditional chefs would never ever use a garlic crusher. And I can absolutely mince garlic with the best of them, but the garlic crusher is much faster. And it also actually, you know, practically purees your garlic, which allows the flavors to be much better distributed. Okay, great. Fantastic. And of course, some of you may or may not know this, but there will often be a lot of garlic left in the hopper of your garlic crusher. So don't use a knife, because a knife could scrape up metal actually. I just take the end of a spoon or a fork, something that's fine enough, and I just get the rest of that out rather than letting it just get washed down the sink. I once taught a cooking class for bulgogi, and so much ended up getting rinsed down the sink that I was alarmed to realize I'd have to explain that you need to scrape your ingredients out and not just assume that everything gets passed through. Okay, so there we have our garlic. I'm just going to angle that down a little bit better. Garlic, right. Okay, next we're going to grate our ginger. Again, some people will chop. I say, why chop when you can grate? Now this ginger, a lot of ginger, you really have to wash thoroughly. And I put this through multiple changes of water, and the water was dirty until the very last one, right? So definitely keep in mind that you will have to wash your ginger. Now, this is really fresh. I mean, so fresh it was still wet from the dirt. It was still wet from the ground. It must have been harvested yesterday. So when it's this fresh, I don't bother peeling it, and especially because the skin is so thin. Now, what I did do was scrub it. I scrubbed it, right? So you don't necessarily need to peel your ginger, depending on the ginger and depending on where it was grown. Tanya, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Just grating our ginger to go into the marinade. And I prefer the second smallest hole. I do not like the little tiny holes because you end up losing so much to those tiny holes. It is very hard, almost impossible in fact, to get out all of the product that you've grated when you use those tiny little round holes. And as someone who hates food waste of any kind, but especially food waste, that frustrates me. And it really is, except for short of rinsing it out with water, you can't really get all of the grated product out of these tiny holes. So ergo, I generally, unless it's some really dire reason to use the smaller hole, I use the second smallest box hole. Now, the ginger and the garlic, they provide flavor. They're also acidic in nature. Now, some people say that acids tenderize meat. I have not been able to find science that acids tenderize meat. What does tenderize meat that's often present when there are acids present is enzymes. Enzymic action tenderizes meat. So when you, for example, when you marinate meat in yogurt or buttermilk, it's not the lactic acid that is tenderizing them, it's the enzymes that are present in the yogurt that are tenderizing your meat, right? So just keep that in mind if you care about food science. Otherwise, what we're getting out of the ginger and the garlic is flavor. It's flavor. It's a wonderful, refreshing flavor profile. But more than flavor, you know, just like in medieval Europe, historically here in Asia, it has been acknowledged that garlic and ginger have health-giving properties. And some of the logic behind why they thought they had health-giving properties wasn't necessarily correct, because in Oriental medicine, as in Western medicine up until almost the modern era, the four humors were utilized to inform the nature and understanding of the properties of ingredients. So, you know, the reason that they thought that ginger and garlic were health-giving wasn't necessarily correct, but it's true. They've got a lot of really great micronutrients in them, and bioflavonoids and all sorts of compounds, so lots of health-giving properties here. You'll notice I'm being pretty generous with the garlic and ginger, and that's because I'm actually making enough marinade, not just for this, this is like 1.5 pounds of chicken, not just for my 1.5 pounds of chicken thighs. When I make this Dalkgalbi marinade, I make it in like by the jarful. And then anytime I want to make Dalkgalbi, I can just pull the jar of marinade out of the fridge and use it. And I have made large quantities of Dalkgalbi marinade and left it in the fridge for years, and it never goes bad because everything in here is antimicrobial in a good way, Right, okay, so we have our ginger and our garlic out. Now I'm going to go ahead and add some of our liquids. So we've got soy sauce. This is barrel brewed Japanese soy sauce from Japan. I actually bought it in Fukushima, Daemado in Korean, Tsushima, right? And I'm an instinct cook. There should be a couple of tablespoons that go into this because of the quantity I'm making, right? I'm definitely not, when it comes to this marinades especially, I don't do a lot of measuring. Sorry, everyone. For my channel members and my patrons, I will be sending out the recipe, my recipe for this dish. I'll be posting that on Discord. So if you would like the recipe, my recipe specifically written with actual instructions and measurements, then consider becoming a channel member or a patron, and you will have access to the recipe that it's not my recipe, it's, you know, it's from here in Korea, but it's the recipe that I use. Okay, so this is toasted sesame oil. God, so good, smells so good. It is one of the primary flavors of modern Korean cuisine. And I like to put quite a bit in because I really like that toasted sesame flavor. So that will impart not just flavor, but will also, will actually help protect some of, provide moisture when you're cooking, and will make a very lovely sauce when the marinade stir fries up. So now we're going to go ahead and add some of our fermented red pepper paste, our gochujang. And, a lot of Asian cuisine, traditional Asian cuisine across Asia involves a lot of fermented products that are then key ingredients in this process. So this is fermented red pepper paste, but Korea has a whole bunch of fermented pastes and sauces. This is just one of many. This just happens to be the one that I think is possibly the most acceptable to Western palates. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put in a couple of spoonfuls of the gochujang. And you can modify the heat of your Dalkgalbi if you want hotter, but you don't want sweeter, for instance. You could add gochugaru, which is red pepper flakes, red pepper powder. I don't really care for things that are so spicy that they hurt. A little bit of spice is plenty for me, just enough to enhance the flavors. So I do not add red pepper powder to my Dalkgalbi marinade. I know some of you out there, though, have mouths that are lined with asbestos, I guess, and have automatic irrigation systems to extinguish the pain of the fire of the burn. So for those of you who have such tolerant systems, feel free to load up on the gochugaru, on the red pepper flakes. Okay, Stargazer, welcome. That's okay, you made it. You're still at the beginning of the process. We're just making the marinade. So I've just added, so we now have, to bring everyone up to speed. First off, for those just joining, welcome to Cooking from Around the World with the Creative Contessa. I am the Creative Contessa, and today we're cooking a splendid and delicious and very, very rarely experienced outside of Korea Korean dish, Dalkgalbi, stir-fried marinated chicken with a bunch of yummy things. Okay, so far we have ginger, we have garlic, we've got gochujang, fermented red pepper paste, we have sesame oil, and we have soy sauce. Right. Next, now this is an ingredient that is hard to get outside of Korea, and it's hard to get this one especially because this is a traditional one. So this is called jotong, and jotong, tong means syrup, not jang, but tong means a kind of syrup, but it's not like, oh God, I might have to run this underwater. I think the sugars have bonded. So thankfully I can talk and do this at the same time. So tong is basically a syrup, and this syrup is actually the byproduct of rice fermentation. So it is a fermented syrup, which means fermented rice syrup, brown rice syrup, which means that it actually has a lot of, really good micronutrients in it. This one actually has dodok in it, which is bellflower root. So it has little chunks of bellflower root to give it extra flavor. And this is not cheap. It has a low glycemic index. It's a nutritious sweetener. It's a nutritionally dense sweetener. And as I just said, low glycemic index means it impacts your blood sugar a lot less, and therefore less of it will go to fat, become fat, etc. This is a much healthier sweetener than, say, refined sugar. This is the traditional sweetener. Unfortunately, jotong is expensive. It's very hard to reproduce on a large scale, and it still have all those great properties I just mentioned, which means that very often commercially made gochujang, which should have jotong in it, does not. It has corn syrup or something equally egregious and synthetic in it. So this you can buy here in Korea at traditional food markets. You can't even buy it at most grocery stores because it is a slow food. One jar, this jar, cost me 40,000 won, which I guess today's exchange rate is like, I don't know, $27, which I know is still a lot. That's why I use it sparingly. And for, when I'm doing these marinades, oh my God, there it is. Here we go. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? I know it looks like molasses, right? But the taste is just, see how it's like, when it says why I said syrup is a bit of a misnomer maybe by our perspective. It's so good. So it doesn't just add sweet to a dish. It adds a flavor as well, and a rich flavor. So you don't need much of this. Again, I'm going to put about, look at that. I'm going to put about a spoonful into it, roughly a tablespoon. Oh, I guess I can use that one. And so and I'm also going to add a little bit of salt in addition to the soy sauce. So we're adding this, basically a sugar, molecularly speaking, the jotong, and we've added the soy sauce and salt. So that's sugar and salt that we've added, and these actually perform a very important part in the marination process, in infusing flavors and moisture into your meat, so that when it cooks, the moisture stays in the meat. But also, it creates flavor on the outside when it browns. So there's a very interesting bit of science that's happening here. So we've got the salt and the sugar are hydrophilic, which means they attract moisture. And so at first, in the initial stages of the marinade, they actually draw the moisture out from the meat. And you're saying, well, that's going to dry out the meat. Yes, if you pull it too soon, that's why you have to let it marinate for a little while. Because at first it draws the moisture out of the meat, but then that moisture binds with the flavors in your marinade, and then the meat reabsorbs it, right? Taking the flavors with them. And there's one more thing we're going to add that will help it take those flavors with them, that it will take the flavors with the water, basically, that it reabsorbs. And that is alcohol. Yes, you're like, well, that looks like a mug. Yes, it is a mug and it has a clear liquid in it, but that clear liquid is soju. It's alcohol, right? So we're adding in a goodly amount of this, and I've mixed this 1-to-1 with water. So we're gonna add all of this in and make our marinade. So the alcohol has a couple of very key properties in the marination process, which some of which are misunderstood commonly. So some people think, well, alcohol tenderizes the meat. It does not. As far as I can tell, there's no science to back up the idea that the alcohol tenderizes the meat. What alcohol does, though, is it extracts alcohol-soluble flavor compounds from the ingredients in your marinade, and it will help communicate those flavor compounds into your meat, right? So the alcohol itself does not moisturize, does not tenderize the meat. It neither moisturizes it nor tenderizes it, but it is, again, it's a flavor extractor. There are 3 flavor extractors in food: fat, water, and alcohol, right? And there are different flavor compounds that are soluble in each of those liquids. So the alcohol here and the water will each extract flavor compounds, and then the alcohol will actually take those flavor compounds and communicate them into the thing that is being marinated. So there's kind of a magic amount of time for marination that after which you get no more benefits, and maybe even you have some detriments, as in your meat will actually turn mushy. The fibers, the meat fibers, the protein fibers will be so tenderized that they'll just go to mush and there'll be no more structure to your meat. So keep that in mind. A lot of people say, oh, you need to marinate things overnight. Depends on the cut of meat. You might not want to do that. Comments. Hey, where I live, there's plenty of Asian markets, so I try to go with my mom once in a while. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of Asian markets, though, in the US, will probably, not many of them will have dochong because it's such an expensive product, right? But I have been told that you can maybe get it on Amazon, but it might not be this slow. This is batch made artisanal. Like, I bought this from the person who makes it. In other words, it might not be quite the same. And with your dochong, you just have to make sure that it is actually dochong. And I don't know what kind of controls there are for what you would get, say, in the United States. Europe, I would trust controls more than I would trust US controls, right? For those of you just joining, welcome to Cooking from Around the World. I am the Creative Contessa, and today I'm taking you to Korea. Well, actually, I'm in Korea, and we are making together a dish called Dalk Galbi. We have prepared the marinade, and you're going to notice that the marinade is very watery, and that's fine. Well, it's very loose. It's very liquid, and that's fine. It doesn't need to be thick. In fact, you don't necessarily want it to be thick. So I'm just going to give this a taste. Yeah, definitely need more dochong. So yeah, you should always taste your marinades before you add the meat and decide if that's the flavor profile you want. So I'm just going to add. I can taste that this is going to need more dochong. So in goes the dochong. And if you have any questions as we are working through this process, do let me know. So Dalk Galbi, as I was saying earlier, literally means chicken ribs. So why is it called this when chickens have ribs, sort of, but not really, but they definitely don't have rib meat? So it's called that because galbi ribs refers to beef ribs traditionally, can also be pork ribs. And that cut of meat has historically, for most of Korean history, been the luxury meat. It still is actually here in Korea, the luxury meat, right? Everyone refers to going out for ribs as something that is an expensive treat, especially beef ribs. So back in the 60s, Korea was highly impoverished because of the Korean War, right? In the aftermath of the Korean War, highly impoverished. Korea is now one of the richest countries in the world. It wasn't back then. So, but people still wanted to at least feel like they were eating something luxurious and delicious. Chicken was significantly less expensive than beef, right? I'm just going to keep playing with this if I don't take evasive action here with my fingers. Chicken was significantly less expensive than beef. And so this dish was created because it consisted of relatively inexpensive components. Chicken, cabbage, lots of vegetables that were marinated and then fried together. So it was a delicious dish. It was a filling dish, but it was not an expensive dish. And so it was called, initially it wasn't even called Dalk Galbi. It was called, I think, Galbi. Anji is the Korean word for food that you eat with alcohol. And then eventually someone just switched the name to Dalk Galbi. And at first it was literally something, it was a traditional food that you would eat while you were drinking soju, right? The thing that would keep you from getting overly drunk, basically. And even to this day, there are bars where the dish they serve is Dalkgalbi to keep you from getting drunk. But it's now much more commonly, a lot of people eat Dalkgalbi without having a single bit of soju with it. It is now a more family-friendly dish, shall we say. So yeah, that is why it is called Dalkgalbi. It was kind of almost a branding to allow people to feel like they were eating something more luxurious when they couldn't really afford full level luxury. Yeah, and yeah, I would say that the jotong, the comment is the jotong is thick as honey. No, it's thicker. And just take a moment if you're enjoying to either double tap your screen if you're watching on the mobile device, or hit the thumbs up if you're watching on some other device where thumbs up is an option. Unfortunately, using the whisk, I'm now going to have to extract all of the ginger and garlic from the whisk because it's all come out of the marinade. See, that's okay. Okay, I am now actually going to remove a good chunk of this out of the bowl and put it in a jar for later use. Like I said, when I make the marinade, I make a whole lot of it and I reserve, I use only what I need for this dish and I reserve the rest for later uses when the jjachang is clinging to the whisk, which is unusual. Save it for later uses so that when I want to make Dalkgalbi, this is the fussiest part of Dalkgalbi, honestly, is making the marinade. So if you have the marinade ready to go, then you can just marinate your meat. And while your meat marinates, you prepare the vegetables that go into the stir fry. So that's why I make a whole jar of it, keep it in the fridge. It never really goes bad. Yeah, that's much better. Definitely needed that extra sweet. Okay. So let's I'm just going to pop it in a bowl for now. I'm not going to fuss with, I'm not going to give you the pleasure of watching me possibly pour marinade all over my counter instead of neatly into a jar. Sorry, everyone who was hoping for the Schadenfreude of watching a potential massive fail. Now, the other reason that you want to have some extra Dalkgalbi marinade just in your fridge, possibly just generally, is because if you can actually take this beautiful, yummy marinade and add it to rice, cooked rice that's already cooked, and stir fry it, and the rice will get, oh my God, so yummy with all the sugars and the salts that are in there and the fat from the sesame oil and your rice. It's going to stir fry into something absolutely mouth-watering. It's going to elevate rice to the next level for you. Okay, let's go ahead and pop in our chicken thighs. Now, one of the things I love about this dish, especially if you use chicken thighs instead of chicken breasts, is that you can just put these chicken thighs just like that. Put these chicken thighs into the marinade whole. You don't have to cut them. You don't have to do anything to them. Just dump them straight into the marinade. And I just make sure that, they're actually going in individually and not as a block so that the marinade actually distributes around it. But as you're cooking, as the Dalkgalbi is cooking, during the cooking process, as it cooks more and more, you break the pieces up using your spoon or your spatula. But you don't have to do any cooking in advance to actually prepare or any preparation to prepare the chicken. Just pull it out of the package as entire thighs and pop it in. Same thing, even if it were bone-in, same thing, just pop it in. Some places also do use drumsticks. They will put drumsticks with the bone in, and if you like drumstick meat, then go for it. Drumstick meat is okay. I just much prefer, I like thigh meat. It's like that happy place between the lifeless flavor of chicken breast and the flavorfulness, you know, and the overly flavorfulness of a drumstick. That's why I like chicken thighs. Also, there's more connective, there's more collagen in chicken thighs than there is in chicken breasts. And of course, there is more fat because there's more fat in the thigh, but also coating the thigh with the skin. Okay, so we're just going to set this aside now. Any questions about the marination process? We will let our meat do its thing over here. And it does not need to go in the fridge. It's not going to be marinating for that long, so there's not going to be a chance for microbial development. But also, this marinade is highly antimicrobial. Highly. Okay, let's go ahead and wash our hands. Right, okay. I've got some spoons covered in jochong that I'll get around to providing the appropriate attention later on, i.e. I'm going to be licking those spoons, but not with you all watching. That's not the kind of channel I want to create here. Okay, any questions about our marination? Otherwise, you can go ahead and ask them, and I will go ahead and move on to the process of making rice. So here's the thing about making proper steamed Asian rice. Okay, you actually have to wash it first. You have to wash your rice significantly because you want to remove the starch from the rice before you actually put it in, before you put it in hot water. If you do not wash your rice, and this rice, this is from a friend's farm. I have a friend who has a country estate, as it were, and she actually has rice paddies, and so she has organic farm, all natural, no pesticides. So this is rice from her farm. It was harvested last year. So it's not quite as fresh as it was when she first gave it to me, but it smells so nice. This is about a cup of rice because I'm here all alone. It's just me right now. So you want to use cold water to wash your rice. Always cold water, never hot water. If you use hot water, you're going to activate the starch dust that you actually want to rinse away. Starch dust will rinse away if you're using cold water. Look at how milk cloudy that already is. So you actually need to toss the rice around, agitate the rice with your hands to loosen all of the starch dust that is on the outside of the rice. That is why we do this process, because if you were to just put this rice into a pot and cook it, it would turn into paste. It would turn into rice gel. It would be, because that's what would happen to the starch that is currently the starch dust, the starch powder, the rice dust that is currently on the outside of these kernels. So you definitely want to give it a good rinse, use your hands to agitate it, and we will be doing multiple rinses of water. So once you've washed your rice thoroughly, then we put it in a pot, again with cold water. And with white rice, with this white short grain rice like we have here, I use a ratio of 2 to 1. Now some people have rice cookers. I don't. I do not have a rice cooker. So I just cook it in a pot. Honestly, I just don't want yet another device that I don't need, right? I can cook rice on the stove. I know how to do it for all the different kinds of rice. So I don't need yet another device that really only does the one thing. Although I know some people who use their rice cookers for other things and their Instapots for other things, but I'm just tired of all the devices, right? I like my stove, I like my pans. I'm old fashioned, but that's probably why I also do medieval living history as a hobby. Let me see, I bet that will taste amazing. Oh yeah. Yeah. If Stargazer, if that was a reference to the rice cooked in this marinade, then yeah, and that will be part of this process as well. I will show you what I call the final stage, the end stage Dalk Galbi, which is Dalkgalbi. Okay, so look and see, just look at how milky that is already, just from that little bit of rinsing. So now I'm going to get out. What did I do with the? There it is, strainer. Unfortunately, this is not the strainer I want. I want the fine mesh strainer because this one, the rice will actually just go straight through it, which is definitely not what I want. Okay. Ah, there it is, thank God. Fine mesh strainer. So here's the problem. Problem is the wrong word, but here's the consideration that you need to have when you are using a strainer, right? It's a lovely big strainer, but it is not a fine mesh strainer. It's a large mesh strainer. And these little tiny short grains will go right through this. So that's why I break out the fine mesh strainer for this purpose. Okay, so I'm just going to pour this off into this bowl. Normally I would just do this in the sink, but you know, I'm trying to be demonstrative for you. And so now we are going to do it again. We are going to give it another rinse. Another wash, another rinse. And you should do this ideally until the water runs clear. So you can see water is not clear yet, so we keep going. Now, if I had plants, I would probably feed this water to them. I don't though, because I know that this water, because it comes from my friend's organic farm, a friend I trust a lot, by the way, because it comes from my friend's organic farm, I know that it doesn't have chemicals or pesticides on it, relatively speaking, so it should be fine for for plants. I don't have any plants though, as I said, unfortunately. Comment, we have too many devices and I love rice. Yeah, it's just there's so many devices. There's so many devices nowadays that you don't need all the shiny new things. Just use what you have. Yeah, you know, when I was getting my start in life on my own, in my own kitchen as a student, I was accustomed to having all sorts of devices from my dad's kitchen, right? Food processors, blenders, you know, bread ovens, you know, like the countertop bread ovens. I didn't have any of that in my, you know, junior college apartment when I was on my own for the first time, really. And I also didn't have the money to go out, and I was living on a shoestring budget, right? I lived on my own money for my own expenses. So I didn't have the money to just go and buy every single kind of specialty tool. And guess what I figured out? That you can do most things in a kitchen without special equipment, without specialized equipment, and especially without gadgets and devices. And that's also a great way to keep your kitchen neater, right? To keep everything neater. So yeah, I'm a big believer in a rubber scraper, a spatula, a knife, and a spoon. And I do believe in different knives for different purposes, because honestly, if you're doing something like slicing or chopping, you really do want a more specialized tool than a less specialized tool for your own safety. But generally, I find I can get away with a chef's knife and a paring knife, and I don't really need a carving knife, or I can get away with just a chef's knife and a paring knife. And actually, that means that I've developed more skills because I don't have all of those devices to do that for me. Okay, so you can see that already we've developed a whole bunch more starch. And again, it's just essential that you get rid of this starch before you cook your rice, unless you want rice paste. If you want rice paste, if you want something that could be molded like Jell-O, or that could be molded into something like Jell-O, then sure, go ahead. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. But if you like I do, rice where each individual grain can be carefully plucked out with the tips of your chopsticks, then this is what you want to do. Right. Okay. Third wash, it usually takes about 2 to 3 washings. Depends on your rice, how processed it's been. This coming from my friend's farm has not been that processed. Right, so it's probably dustier than, and by dustier I mean rice dustier. You can see how milky that still is. And I hate throwing this water away like this, but I also live on the 3rd floor and I don't feel like hauling buckets of water down to the little planters that are outside in the parking area. Oh, Stargazer, I'm really glad. Tell your friends about my channel. Right. Right, so this is definitely, I think this will probably be the last washing. So I have I have 1 cup of rice in here, and for short grain rice, the ratio is generally 2 to 1. Now, if I had soaked this overnight, which I probably should have, but I didn't. If I had soaked this overnight, then and it would be wet, then the ratio would be 1 to 1. If your rice has been soaked overnight and it's already hydrated, then the ratio of rice to water is generally 1 to 1. 1 cup of rice, 1 cup of water. This, however, has not been soaked at all and will not really have absorbed very much of this water just from this washing process. So we'll go with a 2 to 1 ratio. And that's for short grain rice. Right, different lengths of rice have different thicknesses of rice have different ratios, and different kinds of rice even. So there's some of the traditional rices used for paella, for instance, are like a 3 to 1 or a 4 to 1 ratio of rice to water, by which I mean 1 cup of rice, 3 cups of water, or 4 cups of water. Right, so you have to know your rice. You can't just assume that it's going to be the same ratio of water to starch for all rices. If it's a whole grain rice, you're going to need more water. If it's a wild rice, you'll need more water. It all depends. So when you buy a rice, when you buy a bag of rice, if you buy it, do pay attention to the ratio instructions on that rice, because they should be specified to that kind. Let me see. How did meatballs from yesterday taste? Oh my gosh, the pumpis from yesterday turned out super delish. I'm going to do a post on that, I promise. Yesterday, for those who don't know, I did a medieval cooking party on my Medieval Living History channel, and there we did a pumpis, basically lamb meatballs, but made with cooked meat rather than raw ground meat. So it was a very different process, right, from using ground meat. And especially with the almonds, the delicate flavor of the almond sauce with the spicy vivacity of the lamb meatballs, it was definitely a very interesting, it was yummy. It was super yum. It was super duper yum. You know, I know a lot of people are accustomed these days to actually the meat being, think about Western cuisine. We're accustomed to the meat dish itself, the meat being the boring part and the sauce being the flavorful part. But it's in this case, it's the opposite for some of these composite meat dishes. In the medieval kitchen, the meatballs are flavorful, super flavorful, and the sauce that is instructed to go on it is mild. Right, and that's that combination of, of spicy and mild, spicy and creamy, especially in the case of the almond milk, or in the case of the jaune sauce I made last time, which was the yellow custard sauce, right? Very, very mild, but creamy. Those two combinations complement each other so well. So and then the opposite is true if you're doing a roast. Medieval roasts were by themselves pretty flavorless except for the Maillard reaction component. But the sauces that are instructed to go with those roasts are so zesty and super densely flavorful. So you end up with that, again, that combination of bland, and that word has, pejorative connotations that I don't necessarily mean. You have the combination of bland with super, super zesty, super spicy. So yeah, it's very interesting how in the Middle Ages they acknowledge that you don't want too much flavor with too much flavor. You want balance. You want a balance of flavors. Yeah. Okay. As I said, it's kind of remarkable how much starch you will continue to get. And this is actually why I should have soaked it last night. Wish I had. I should have soaked this last night so that it would actually completely loosen all of that starch, because there is just so much rice starch from the process of removing the bran, right? The reason we have white rice is not because rice comes out white. It doesn't. No rice comes out white. It all has bran. So it all starts off as some other color. Not necessarily brown. You've got purple, you've got red, you've got black, right? All kinds of shades of brown and tan. But no rice starts out white. You have to remove the bran, the germ, which is unfortunately where most of the micronutrients are, or all of the micronutrients are. All white rices at this stage is macronutrients. So just keep that in mind. This is not useful for micronutrients, vitamins. It's useful for macronutrients, meaning starch, calories, calorific intake, right? Which, you know, if you're a farmer and you live an active lifestyle, that's fine. Most modern people, Koreans included, don't really live that kind of active lifestyle though. Right? They're even in Korea, people are getting much more sedentary than they used to be. So, you know, it's a problem. Now, what most people don't know is that if you cook rice and then you let it cool for 24 hours in the fridge after it's cooked, the starches that have become sugars through the cooking process will retrograde back into what's called resistant starch. And resistant starch is super good for you. It's much better for you than non-resistant starch, because resistant starch is not broken down by your your metabolism. It's broken down by the bacteria in your intestines, and it's good bacteria that it encourages to grow. But it also means you will not get any caloric intake from it. So you can eat rice that is cold and retrograded, and the caloric value for you is much less than freshly cooked rice. But more importantly than the calorie control aspect is the fact that resistant starch is very good for your gut microbial health. Extremely good, which is why dishes like sushi that traditionally were made with rice that had been cooked and cooled for a while, that's why those used to be so healthy. But now that they're being made with rice that is barely cooled, in a lot of restaurants, you're not getting the same health benefits. So yeah, look up the effects of resistant starch. And it's not just rice. This have pasta too, potatoes as well. That's why rice, if it sits in the fridge overnight, it gets hard. You think it's dry. It's not dry. The starches have retrograded to resistant starch. Okay, it might be a little dry, but it's mostly that the starches have just retrograded to resistant starch. Right. So the softer your rice is, the less resistant starch it has. The harder your rice is, the more resistant starch it has. And there's actually a very interesting process where you can cool and cook and heat and cool, heat and cool, heat and cool rice multiple times. The more you do it, the more resistant starch you build up, right? And the more resistant starch that will never go back to sugars you build up. So actually, if you do heat up rice and cool it multiple times, it gets better for you. Better for your microbial health anyway. Okay, so I'm calling this good. So we're now going to go ahead and start the rice cooking process. And while the rice cooks, we will then prepare the ingredients for the stir fry itself. Right. So I just have a regular old pot. Although, in fairness, this is a pot that I bought in Korea. So it's a made in Korea pot. I love this thing because it's got this wonderful heavy bottom. Heavy bottom for the win. When in your cooking equipment, cooking pots, cooking pans, you really almost always want a heavy bottom one, because the heat will be conducted better. It will be conducted more evenly, and it will also not cool down so quickly. So you get better efficiency for cooking from a heavy bottom pot. Keep that in mind. Okay, so I'm just going to transfer our rice into this pot, and I will absolutely 100% use my hands for this process. And then we will measure in cold water, because you want to get the right cooking time, you really want that kind of gradual heating process as part of the gradual cooking of your rice. You know, as the water heats up, the effect of the heat is also being imparted through the rice. You don't want to try to jumpstart this with hot water. So 1 cup of rice equals 2 cups of water. And I happen to have, happily, a Pyrex 2-cup liquid measure. Now, for those of you who are new to cooking, new-ish to cooking maybe, or maybe you just never learned, there's a difference between liquid measuring cups, and dry measuring cups. This is a liquid measuring cup. You'll notice it has a pouring spout, it has a pouring handle, and you'll notice the measurement stops well below the top so that you can transport your liquids easily. It's not that you can't use a dry measure for liquid, but dry measures end at the top of the measurement. So if you put liquid in that, if you put a cup of water in a dry measure, you're going to lose water as you transfer it over, and it's just not going to pour as nicely. So I do recommend, in this case, definitely there is an advantage having a specialized dry measuring cup and a specialized liquid measuring cup, just to make that clear. So here we have our 2 cups of water. I will pour that into the pot, right? And then we will leave the lid off for now. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put this on what would be a medium heat normally on the front burner, but on my back burner, it's not quite. And what we're essentially going to do is we're going to let that achieve a boil, and then we will let it boil down until it reaches the top of the rice, at which point we will cover it. So I'll show you what that looks like when we get to that stage. But in the meanwhile, we're going to move on to the preparation of the ingredients for our stir fry itself, and then we'll talk about each of those ingredients as we go along. Right, okay. So I'm going to put some things away. Put away our gochujang, our fermented red pepper paste. If you can find a good artisanal red pepper paste that is in, one sign that it's artisanal is that it's not in a plastic tub like this. If it comes in a glass jar, it's much more likely to be, or if not guaranteed to be, artisanal. Also, then you have a glass jar, you're not getting plastic leaching in your food. Unfortunately, they did not put this, artisanally made gochujang in a jar. They put it in a glass tub, but that seems to be where things are heading these days in general. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'll show you, for those just joining, here is our meat marinating beautifully, our chicken thighs marinating in the Dalk Galbi marinade. Let's talk about some of our ingredients, or all of the ingredients actually, as we go through them. So this giant looking thing is not a leek. It's a green onion. In Korea, green onions are respectably sized, shall we say. So I will go ahead and show you this actually is not something that's going to vanish into it. So, a lot of modern Western recipes, you chop onions, and the idea is that the onion should vanish into the sauce or the preparation. No, not here. This should be a respectably sized vegetable. So we're actually not going to have to chop these very small at all. Let me just angle us down. Okay. And if you are just joining us, welcome to Cooking from Around the World with the Creative Contessa. Today we are making a delicious and completely underrepresented dish outside of Korea anyway, Dalkgalbi. Right. So we definitely do not need these to be small. Nice big chunks. We want chunks, chunky chunks. And we will be using some of the green as well. I reserve the green and I add the green in at the end of cooking because the green cooks at a different pace than the whites do. Not every Korean who makes Dalkgalbi does that, but that's what I prefer to do it's a texture thing. I prefer the greens to be have a little life left in them rather than go completely soggy. But you do you, boo. If you prefer a softer, more pliable green of your green onions, then add them in all at the same time. Of course, there's always, some people ask, well, where is the clear dividing line between white and green? For me, it's sort of where it stops being like, this is still kind of white to me, right? Because it's still got all the layers. This, we're getting into the green, right? If it's squishy like that. So I will prepare these for adding in later. And the really dried ends like this, I save these in my stock. I have a bowl of vegetables in the freezer, vegetable clippings, snippets and ends and leftovers that I specifically save and use for stock when I'm making stock. And these have been washed, and you should absolutely wash your green onions thoroughly. If you're using leeks, which you shouldn't use for this recipe, but in general, here's a way to prevent utter disaster. If you are cooking with leeks, you absolutely want to wash them multiple times in multiple changes of water with lots of agitation, because leeks have dirt layered in between the layers as they grow, basically. And so if you do not wash them thoroughly, you will end up very, very sad, as I did the first time I cooked with leeks, back when I was a student in my very undersupplied kitchen. Yeah, I did not know that you needed to wash leeks thoroughly. And so I made a chicken pot pie, and the flavor was so amazing, but the grit of the sand from the leeks was so utterly, devastatingly disgusting and off-putting that I had to throw the thing out. There was no saving it. There was no saving it. I guess I could have maybe tried rinsing, putting it in a strainer and rinsing it so thoroughly that all you had left were the chunks of the, you know, the vegetables and the chicken, and all the sauce was rinsed away, but I doubt that would have even saved it. So remember, rinse your vegetables thoroughly. Always, always, always. All right, so I've put the greens in a separate bowl from the the whites of the green onions, as it were. I'll just go ahead and scrape these into a bowl. And the nice thing about this stir fry is that Dalkgalbi is that it is entirely possible to put most everything into one bowl and then you dump it into the pan together. And we'll talk about the pan when we get to that stage, because there's a special kind of pan you need for Dalkgalbi if you want the best searing effect. Not that you can't cook in a regular whatever, but yeah. Okay, so we actually have, look at these beautiful purple sweet potatoes, goguma, goguma. These are Korean sweet potatoes, so they are not nearly as sweet as those giant orange things that you get in the United States that are called sweet potatoes. They just don't have that much sugar in them. They are much closer in flavor to a regular white potato. Well, closer in terms of sweetness to a regular white potato, but they do have just a little bit of sweet. And we're going to be including this as basically, we're going to be including this in our dish. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out where to put this so that you can, yeah, there we go, as half moon. So I've cut it in half and I washed this thoroughly. But the nice thing about Asian sweet potatoes is you don't need to peel them. The peels are very, very easily edible. It's not, you don't have to fight with it, right? So there's no waste from peeling it. Just want to make sure I did wash these pretty thoroughly, but now I'm paranoid. I did wash everything very thoroughly, but my paranoia is getting the best of me. Okay. Oh, we're getting close to boiling anyway on the rice, but it's still not at the point that it should, where we actually put the lid on and let it go. Okay, so we're actually going to cut these into half moons. And we want these to be relatively thin because we do want it to cook pretty quickly. So we're talking 1/8 of an inch. I mean, you get to decide for you, right? If you're making your, honestly, I've seen Dalkgalbi with sweet potatoes of different sizes, different thicknesses, even different shapes. I personally prefer them to be thinner, then they're better distributed throughout the dish, and then they also cook faster, and you don't have to overcook other parts while waiting for your sweet potatoes to do their thing. Okay, I'm just gonna dump that into, put that right there with the onions. No need for a separate thing. Okay, now this is something that I will add later. Do any of you know what these are? These beautiful, beautiful leaves are. If Ryan's there, I don't want him to answer because he knows. Does anyone know what these beautiful, beautiful leaves are? So these are called perilla leaves. They are sometimes erroneously referred to as sesame leaves. Koreans call them sesame leaves, but they're not. They're not from the sesame plant. They're from the perilla plant. And they have an amazing flavor profile. They're citrusy and peppery and lightly minty, but not really. Absolutely scrumptious. So you can get these at Korean grocery stores in various places in the US. And these are also my preferred. If you're doing Korean barbecue, this is my preferred wrapping leaf, 100%. Forget boring old lettuce. This is what you want. And this is going to be a major flavor giver in this dish. So we're actually going to cut this into strips. And these have already been washed. We'll cut them into strips. And we will add these towards the end. So I'm going to put these in a separate bowl because they are more delicate. They don't need as much time to cook as, say, the cabbage that we'll be chopping up here shortly. Look at that. Yeah. So good. Oh, gosh. So yummy. Fantastic. Okay, next the cabbage. Forgot to get it out of the fridge. Cabbage is cruciferous vegetables. Cabbage specifically is a major player in Korean cuisine. And this dish is heavy on the cabbage. Now, I personally like a higher ratio of cabbage to meat. Like I like less meat and more vegetables. Other people, you know, when this is being prepared as a more luxury dish, then having more meat to vegetables is preferable. You know, if you go to a Korean restaurant, you're probably going to, if you go to a Korean restaurant that has Dalk Galbi, there'll probably be more chicken than cabbage. And that's okay. I just prefer myself a little bit more cabbage. Yeah, perilla leaves are super yum. Yep. Good. Stargazer, where have you had perilla leaves? At your local Korean restaurant or in some other dish that you have prepared, or, you know, some other cuisine? So with cabbage, cabbage has a core, right? And so you want to get that core out because that core is bitter. Some people will cut it up. I've tried that and it just doesn't taste very good to me. I don't like the core. And the texture when you cook the core is not really super desirable either, I think. I don't like it. It gets to cook it enough, it gets really mushy. And I just don't, that's my preference. So yes, even though I don't like wasting food, I really don't like the cabbage core, so I do cut it out. Historically, of course, you should definitely be eating your cabbage core. It's not a part that should be thrown out. Yeah, if I had pigs, I would feed it to the pigs, for instance. That's a lot of food waste. Historically, it wasn't that humans necessarily ate everything on a vegetable, but they usually frequently, humans historically in Eurasia and Africa have had pigs. At some point we have kept pigs. And in societies that keep pigs, food waste from food preparation isn't waste, it's pig food. So, you know, you have pigs who are fed a wide variety of ingredients depending on where it is those pigs live. And that's something I'm increasingly thinking about medieval cuisine, especially, is that, you know, okay, well, we've got this almond mash, for instance, left over for making almond milk. What do medieval people do with it? They give it to their pigs because it doesn't have any flavor left. And I haven't found that it's useful for baking into something else, for instance. So it would make sense that after you extract the flavor from your almonds, that you just feed the almond mash to your pigs. Pigs are happy, you're happy. Your pigs get, you know, all those beneficial fats, fatty acids that are left in your almond mash, and you know, it's a win-win situation. You don't have to buy extra food for your pigs or have to worry if it's not yet acorn season, because it's not always acorn season, by the way. Okay, so I basically put half a head of cabbage in this. A lot of recipes will not call for that much. They will call for much, much less. Okay, brilliant. Okay, that is almost all of the ingredients that I'm going to put in mine. Some people also add like onions, like white onion or yellow onion slices. Some people also add carrots. I didn't find any carrots that I really liked in terms of the look. I've got a shipment of organic carrots from Jeju Island coming in a couple of days, but they're not here yet. So the last component, the last thing that we will be adding to this that is not something that thankfully I have to prepare, these are called tok, right? Tteokbokki. And tteokbokki are rice dumplings. They are made from rice flour. They are chewy. And, you know, it's kind of like Korea's answer. This is the historical, traditional Korean answer to pasta, things like gnocchi, right? Right, but they're made from 100% rice flour. And so they're super chewy. When they heat up, right now, they're hard because they're cold. But that resistant starch, right? When you heat it back up again, the resistant starch tends to break down. But the same thing would apply here. If I were to heat these up, cool them, heat them, cool them, heat them, cool them, they would get stiffer and stiffer and more al dente with more resistant starch as you go along. But yeah, so these are tteokbokki, which are added to this for, you know, the chew and of course the caloric intake. Some of you might know tteokbokki with the spicy red sauce that is very, very famous Korean street food. I actually don't care for tteokbokki in that spicy red sauce because it's actually too sweet for me. It's not the spicy, it's the sweet. Okay, so our rice. Our rice has now achieved the level of the water being right at the surface. So I'm now going to put the lid on and turn it to low, and we'll give it 10 minutes, and then I'll turn the heat off and just let it finish steaming. And that will be our rice. Okay, so we are basically ready. We have prepared everything. Just going to straighten up a little bit. We have our mixture of cabbage and the whites of the green onion, and goguma, Asian sweet potatoes here. We have over here, we have our thighs, which are marinating. We have the greens, which will add towards the end of cooking, and also the perilla leaves, which will add towards the end of cooking. So basically, we are ready to actually do the cooking. So I'm about to talk for a minute about the right kind of pan to use for this, because it is kind of essential is maybe too strong a word, but it's important. So you'll notice that I have a very wide pan. It's like 12 inches. It's a 12-inch pan, but also the sides are relatively low. Despite it being 12-inch, they're only about an inch and a half to 2 inches high, right? And they're angled out. So the traditional, I really do need to get, Kondotier, if you're out there, Ryan, we need to get a traditional Dalkgalbi pan. A traditional Dalkgalbi pan, if you go to a Dalkgalbi restaurant, is similarly big or even bigger. It's actually wider and the sides are even lower. And that's important for letting the moisture evaporate so that you fry the ingredients, you don't steam the ingredients. So the difference between frying and steaming is flavor and texture. If you fry the ingredients in this marinade, then you're going to end up with the Maillard effect. So the Maillard effect is when the enzymes, when the amino acids in protein meet with sugar molecules under heat that is higher than 250 degrees Fahrenheit. So when that happens, you have this Maillard reaction in which flavor compounds of a massive variety are built, and you get that browning effect, right? So that's the Maillard reaction. If you steam something, steam has a maximum temperature unless you do some very weird things to the pressure and the ingredients. Steam has a maximum temperature that is not 250 degrees. It's below 250 degrees. And so you're not going to build those amazing flavors. So that is why it's important that we also not overfill our pan with ingredients so that the moisture can evaporate and the heat can actually build and be transmitted and you get the Maillard effect. So this is true anytime you're sauteing meat. Do not overload your pan. Sauteing vegetables, if you want the Maillard reaction, do not overload your pan. If you overload the pan, you're going to get steaming instead of the Maillard reaction, right? Okay, so that is why it's important to have a broad pan, ideally with low sides, so that the moisture can evaporate more efficiently. Okay. Oh gosh, it smells so good. Someday, maybe not far, we will have the option to somehow convey smells through the live stream so that you can smell this wonderful thing that I am inhaling. Yeah, tteokbokki are super yummy. Stargazer says, I've had perilla leaves at a restaurant, but I haven't been able to find them at any markets. So Stargazer, you've tried at all of your local Korean, have you actually looked for Korean grocery stores? Do you have any actual Korean grocery stores? And even if they're not on the counter, if there's a Korean grocery store near you, even if they don't have the perilla leaves, they don't have your perilla leaves there in the shelf, ask them. They can get them for you because the Korean restaurants are getting them from somewhere. Also, if your markets don't have them, go to a Korean restaurant where you've had them and see if they'll just sell some to you. They probably will. Very often they will. They'll look at you a little askance and then they'll realize that you're an awesome person who understands and loves Korean food and they'll sell you some. They might even just give you some because you're cute. Yeah, so Stargazer, my tip to you, go to a Korean restaurant that you know has perilla leaves, where you've had perilla leaves. Ask them if they'll sell you some. They'll probably give you some. Right. Okay, everyone. Are there any questions before we start this process? Now, ideally, I would let this marinate for probably another hour or so. But I don't want to wait. I'm hungry. And, we're getting to that point where we should do this. So the interesting thing about this stir fry is that it is very much a dump and fry situation. Some Western cuisine, we're like, oh, well, we'll fry the meat first, or even in certain Chinese stir fries. Oh, we fry the meat first and separate, and then we do the vegetables, and then we mix it all together. None of that here. This is definitely, you can definitely see the shades of the more common approach to cooking than you would see, say, in the royal palace kitchens, for instance. And there's no judgment there. I'm a big fan of the simplicity of a dish that allows you to just dump and cook. And, I've added the complexity of adding this in late, the green parts of the green onions in later, and the perilla leaves in just a little bit later, because I want a specific texture from them. But really, in the original in hardcore Dalkgalbi land, which is Chuncheon, is the origin, is where this dish was invented in the 60s. Chuncheon, just dump everything into your pan. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get this party started, as it were. And for now, I'm going to keep the chicken separate in the bowl, but we'll put it all into the pan. We'll put the chicken in first, and then we will put in the mixture of vegetables. And I will probably be batch cooking this because, as I said, this isn't actually as big as a real Dalkgalbi pan. Real Dalkgalbi pans are actually much bigger. And so I will be 100% batch cooking this for that reason. But if I had a proper Dalkgalbi pan like this, I have to cook it over 2 burners, but that's okay. I could do that, right? If I had a proper Dalkgalbi pan, I would probably cook it. It would be about this big, and then I could put everything in there, no problem. Yep. Okay, questions, anyone? Questions? If you're just joining, welcome to Cooking from Around the World with the Creative Contessa. I'm the Contessa, and we're making Dalkgalbi. We're about to get this baby started. So here's another interesting thing. They do heat up the pans, but they don't heat them up very much. Right, so that's kind of part of the process here, is that you heat up the pan a little bit, but not very much, not as much as we would before you add the ingredients. And I think that's an acknowledgement of there wants to be, especially with the marinade, you want there to be some boiling happening. But the interesting thing is that because of the nature of this dish, you don't need to add oil, because you've got actually in your chicken thighs, you've got the skin there still. That will render out. So I start by putting the chicken thighs skin down, right onto the pan. And I said we're going to be doing this in batches, so I'm not going to put all of them in. Right, and then we add some of our mixture here of our sweet potatoes, our cabbage, and our green onions, the whites of our green onions. That's a mouthful to say. Right, okay. So this is kind of the maximum I want. I don't want much more than that. I'm going to go ahead and put in my tteok now, some of them anyway. And Korea actually has some very interesting kind of tteokbokki, that some of which actually have fillings, like they're round and they have cheese in them now. And so this is a dish that is very frequently topped with cheese, mozzarella cheese no less, in Korean restaurants. I, however, do not have any mozzarella cheese. So this will not be tea to Dalkgalbi today. It will just be Dalkgalbi. Okay, let's see. Oh gosh, this smells so good. Yeah, so these pans, these Dalkgalbi pans that I'm talking about, I have seen them at big Asian grocery stores in the US, in the equipment section. I have seen Dalkgalbi pans. I've also seen them at larger Korean grocery stores that have an equipment section. And again, if you go to your Korean grocery store, or even your Korean restaurant if they have Dalkgalbi. But if you go to your Korean grocery store and you say, I would like a Dalkgalbi pan, they can probably get one for you. They have the connections. And it shouldn't be that expensive. Dalkgalbi pans are not expensive here. They're like 40,000 won. Granted, Korea is no longer very much of a manufacturing country. Most equipment made in Korea is not made in Korea. It's made in China or Vietnam or Indonesia. So yeah, it's very interesting how that pendulum has kind of come full swing. Okay, meanwhile, I'll just gather up some of my dirty dishes. This would normally be my condotiero's role, but he has cleverly absented himself from this process by visiting family in Seattle over the holidays. Well played, sir. Well played. I don't think he's even watching because unfortunately his phone died. Yeah. So what are your favorite Korean dishes? Do any of you have any of you tried Dalkgalbi? I guess is an important question. And if so, do you have any, if not, do you have any favorite Korean dishes that you have tried? Now you want a pretty high heat on this stage. And you know, you have to know, you'll know your stove, you'll know what its abilities are, what counts as high, what counts as medium. Okay. Well, we have now reached the 10 minute on our rice, so I'm now just going to turn off the heat and let it finish steaming for 10 more minutes. Now, this Dalkgalbi, once it's fried up, we're going to eat it. You can eat it like you can eat Korean barbecue, or like you can eat jeokbokum, spicy pork stir fry, right? With leaf wraps, right? You can take a little bit of the stir fry, put it in your yummy perilla leaf, make it into a teeny tiny little Dalkgalbi sandwich or Dalkgalbi burrito, as you might say, a little tiny Dalkgalbi packet, and pop it in your mouth and enjoy it. All right, so you can eat this either with spoon and chopsticks, or you can make little leaf wraps out of it. Your choice. And you can do both, alternatingly, you know, either way. Of course, if you can get a bigger variety of leaves, that will be better in terms of nutrients, because, you know, all these different leaves have different micro and macronutrient properties, and variety is the spice of health, shall we say. Okay. Oh, yeah. I can smell all of those delicious flavors aerosolizing and filling the apartment. I can smell the garlic and the ginger and the alcohol and the gochu and the dotong, and I can smell the Maillard reaction as well. Oh yeah, that fat is just rendering out of that chicken so nicely, out of the chicken skins, the skin from the chicken thighs. Also, so condiments. Let's talk about condiments and banchan, side dishes. So, of course, there are many side dishes that are often served with Korean food, but Dalkgalbi has some very traditional ones. I don't really have any of the traditional ones. I do have some. So raw garlic is served as a side dish that you would just put a slice usually, and then you put a slice of the raw garlic in your little leaf wrap and then pop it in your mouth. There is also a chilled soup that is made with daikon radish, and it's sweet and sour and chilled. And that actually cools your mouth, literally cools your mouth from the heat of the Dalkgalbi, especially if you get spicy Dalkgalbi. And if you go to Korea, the restaurant will actually ask you, one of the options if you go to a Dalkgalbi restaurant is going to be, do you want it extra spicy? Caveat mandator. Warning to the diner, right? You only say yes if you really, really mean it. Remember, Korean spice levels are not Western spice levels. Okay. Here we're getting that fantastic, here, look, check this out. Yeah, looks good. Right, so now we'll start the stir frying process. And remember, you really do want to scrape, because you really do want to get those lovely brown bits off of the pan. Right? You don't want them to stick and burn. You want them to distribute onto the thing that you're stir frying. So you want to really make sure you're actually working to scrape that up. And as the heat comes up, it should actually cause the cabbage to wilt, and then the moisture from the cabbage will be released and will help you scrape up those flavor molecules. And as your thighs start cooking, you can tell because they'll be easier to break apart. You just start breaking them apart with your spatula. And this is exactly the technique they use in a Dalkgalbi restaurant. So very often, Dalkgalbi, traditionally, it's prepared at the table. It's prepared tableside. So they bring out the entire pan, basically, and just put it in the center of your table where there's a stove, basically, and they cook it there. Unfortunately, these days, they're not doing it tableside very much anymore. Most restaurants now prepare it back in the kitchen and then just bring the whole pan out and put it in your table. It's not quite the same. You don't have quite that wonderful spectacle that it used to. But I will admit, it's not necessarily very ergonomic for the cook to bend over your table, all of the diners, awkwardly while they try to do the stirring. So I can see why. It was easier back when tables were still traditional Korean seating, when you had floor seating. And then it's easier to reach over the table if you're on your knees cooking. But almost all restaurants in Korea now do Western style seating. In the last 10 years, I've seen a precipitous drop in traditional seating options in Korean restaurants. It's now all Western style chairs. And many restaurants have refitted, right? 10 years ago, that restaurant around the corner, for instance, had floor seating, but now they've refitted and now they have Western style chairs. So even Koreans are no longer able to sit on the floor, is what I've been told by my Korean friends. Like, they're amazed that I can sit on the floor forever and eat and do all the things. They can't believe it because they can't themselves anymore. It's kind of sad because Western style chairs really do break your body. They really do. So if you see, as I do, if you see that things are starting to stick and it doesn't want to come off, you have two choices. You could use alcohol or you could use water to try to loosen it. Wow, this just smells so good. And also at this stage, I'm going to actually ladle in some more of the marinade. All right, and then that's going to cook into a nice thick sauce that's just going to coat everything. Oh, wow, this just smells so amazing. Oops, a little too enthusiastic over here. And you'll know your chicken is done because it will be easy to cut through it. So that's the other reason that these chicken thighs are just put in here whole. You know they're done because it's easy to cut through them with your wooden spoon, right? I'm still getting rubbery resistance here. It's not done yet. It's not cooked yet. It's not very easy, you know, in these chicken thighs like this to just stick a thermometer in them to see if they're done. So the spatula technique is the tried and true technique from Korea. Yes. So I'm going to try to show this to you a little more up close. Yeah, look at that. So yummy. Again, I wish I could communicate the smells that are filling the kitchen right now. It's quite lovely. Okay, let me see. I personally love bibimbap or kimchi jjigae. Yeah, kimchi jjigae is super yummy. I love a good kimchi jjigae. I really love it when it has nice big chunks of tofu in it. Yeah, And bibimbap is fantastic. There's so many kinds of bibimbap. It's wonderful because it's such a flexible dish. My favorite bibimbap is what they call wild herb bibimbap, which are basically like greens that are just harvested in the forest and mushrooms that are harvested in the forest. And then that turned into dalsot bibimbap, which is the hot stone pot bibimbap. So if you combine those ingredients with the hot stone pot, I love, my favorite. Dalsot bibimbap for the win. Have either of you had dalsot bibimbap? Any of you had dalsot bibimbap? Hot stone bibimbap? Hot stone pot bibimbap. Basically this clay pot is heated up, and then the bibimbap is put in that. The rice is put in, and the toppings are put in that, and it's served at the table, scalding hot. And then what I like to do is add my soup, because it always comes with soup. Add my soup straight into that scalding, that boiling, that magma hot pot. And then it automatically, the soup reaches an instant boil, and it basically turns the rice in the dalsot into this creamy risotto-like texture. Wonderful. The best way to eat dalsot bibimbap ever. So yeah, love bibimbap. It really is. And what I love about it is that flexibility, that it can suit a wide variety of tastes. Yeah, I would say bibimbap is probably the most foreigner-friendly Korean dish, other than barbecue. Barbecue is probably the most foreigner-friendly, kogigui. But other than that, I think bibimbap is the next most foreigner-friendly dish, the least foreign, as it were. Because in Korea, there are some very interesting things, even interesting to modern Koreans, shall we say. I really personally love pigskin, pork rind. Grilled pork rind. So they actually take pork rind here and they grill it on the cold charcoal grill. And oh my God, it turns all melty and yummy and chewy. And you dip that in soybean powder, which is like lightly sweet. And the fats from the grilled chicken or pork rind just combine with the sweetness of that powder and make almost like this meat frosting. As strange as that sounds, it's delicious, I promise. Okay, let me see. Yeah, so dalsot bibimbap, hot stone pot bibimbap. If you can find a restaurant that serves it, absolutely try it. And as I said, my tip is the second they serve it, pour your soup that comes with soup, pour the soup into it and stir until the moisture evaporates. And you will get what I call bibimbap risotto. Chef's kiss. I actually have a clay pot. I could actually demonstrate dalsot bibimbap at one of our future Cooking from Around the World episodes, no problem. I was just thinking, oh, I can't do that. No, I can. I have 2 clay pots. I can absolutely demonstrate it for you. But also, if I go to my favorite restaurant, one of my favorite restaurants here, I'll live stream and show you the process live. And then you can hear and see it happen before you do it to yourself, maybe. Let me see. Haven't tried Dalk Galbi, but love Korean barbecue. So I'll be honest. Korean barbecue is like the least Korean thing about Korean cuisine. I'm not certain how to put it that way. Yeah, Korean barbecue it's just meat on a barbecue. Sometimes it's marinated. Often it's not. In Korea, it's not marinated nearly as often as it's marinated at Korean barbecue in the U.S. And so you end up with. It's just there's not many Korean flavors about it necessarily. Now, if your Korean barbecue is served with condiments like sesame oil and samjang, then those flavors are certainly very Korean. But yeah, I mean, I would say Korean barbecue is a good way to get people into Korean food who are nervous about Korean food. And then in that process, maybe you could introduce them to things like kimchi as an accompaniment, as a condiment for the barbecue, for instance. In my fridge right now, I've got 2 kinds of kimchi. I have cabbage kimchi and I have baby radish kimchi. Not baby radish, sorry. Baby daikon radish kimchi. Okay, let's check out this. sorry, can't actually see me cooking. Apologize for that. Our chicken seems to be almost all done. Just a couple of pieces that are still trying to be more chewy than I might like. And this is another reason that you start your Dalkgalbi with the chicken whole. So that part of the cooking process is breaking it up, but also, you know, testing it for doneness. Right? And you can see how much this is really cooked down, right? When we started, the ingredients were to the top, but the reality is that cabbage really has a very high percentage of water in it. So yeah, there's that. Okay, let me just grab a quick sip of water. I've been talking for a while. So, you know, the history of gochu, this red pepper paste that's here in our marinade, right? People think of that now as a quintessentially Korean ingredient, but the reality is it's not. Gochu is a very recent addition to not just Korean cuisine, but Eurasian cuisine, full stop. Gochu red chili peppers are from they come from Mexico. That's their origin. They come from Mexico, which means that they were not here before the Columbian Exchange. And there's some weird conspiracies out there that want to claim otherwise, but it's just, I'm sorry guys, it's just not true. There's, no matter how you want to look at it, you can pretend that some birds from Mexico flew across the Pacific 10,000 miles and brought chili pepper seeds with them somehow, all that distance. No, I'm sorry. Gochu was introduced into Korea via Japan by Dutch traders who brought it up with them from, you know, Europe after Columbus brought them back from the New World. But they don't actually start getting incorporated into Korean food, it seems, until the 19th century. And even then it's only used for kimchi by the poor people, because people didn't actually like the flavor, apparently, and the rich, the nobility and the royal court definitely did not like the flavor. So the only reason it was added into kimchi at that point is because the gochugaru, the gochu pepper, retards microbial growth, which extends the shelf life of your kimchi, which if you're on the bottom end of the socioeconomic ladder, that matters. Being able to preserve food for longer, big win. But it doesn't seem to have been used very much or at all in actual dishes, cooked dishes, until the Korean War, is when it seems to make it. And after the Korean War, suddenly gochu is everywhere. So, yeah, I'm sorry for people who think that the Korean food has always been spicy and chili pepper flavored. It just hasn't. Yep. So look, check out this. Look at that, all that yummy flavor that built up on the bottom of the pan. So here's a thing that breaks my heart every time I see it. In a Korean restaurant, if you go to a Dalkgalbi restaurant and they prepare this in the pan for you, right? This layer of flavor builds up on the bottom, but they do not deglaze it and scrape it off. They just leave it on the pan. And then when it comes time for the bokkeumbap phase, which I'm about to demonstrate for you, they then take this metal scraper that's designed to scrape these pans, and they scrape that beautiful layer of flavor off and they throw it away. All of the beautiful glazed, yummy Maillard reaction compounds thrown away. Breaks my heart every time. So I do not condone the disposal of the yummy, chunky flavor bits from the bottom of the pan. They should be carefully extracted and reincorporated into the dish, as I just did by scraping it onto my spoon or my spatula and then back of my knife, you know, putting that then into the dish. I can't abide by that. I cannot do it. I have to look away. If I go to a Dalkgalbi restaurant, I'm honest, I'm neurotic enough. I have to look away when they scrape the pan and just throw it away. Right, okay, so let me show you what we've got here. Okay, doesn't that look super yummy? Okay, maybe not. I mean, honestly, if you really think about it, some of the best tasting food is actually some of the least good looking food, if you really want to really think about how it looks, but it's absolutely super delicious. So I'm now going to actually remove part of this, and I'm going to show you the bokkeumbap phase because we're at the final stage. So here is our rice. Let's go ahead and check our rice out. Okay, so we're now going to fluff up our rice. Grab some. Okay, so here's our rice. I'm just going to take my chopsticks and fluff it up. See, look how nice that is. Nice and fluffy, right? With individual grains that I could easily pull off, right? Still has a nice chew to it, which I like. I like my rice to be al dente. Just like I like most things to be al dente. I like my fruit to be al dente. I like my vegetables to be al dente. I'm an al dente kind of girl. What can I say? So I'm now going to remove, normally, the normal process would be that I would eat through about half of this with leaf wraps and yumminess, but no rice actually normally. And then we take the leftovers, we add rice to the pan and we fry it all together. So I'm just going to demonstrate that process of frying the bokkeumbap up with the leftovers here in the pan. Okay. Okay. So it's just me. It's just me today. So I'm here all alone. And I just realized I need some nori. So I'm going to go grab some nori, everyone. I'm still here. You can still hear me. Nori is called kim in Korean. Nori is referred to as kim. That's why it's called kimbap, because it's rice wrapped in nori, in seaweed, right? Got this little bit here. So we're actually going to chop this up. This actually becomes a kind of condiment for goes into, its flavor giver into our bokkeumbap, right? So we just cut it into strips, basically. Oh no, okay, that's rancid. Okay, oh God, that's so rancid. Excuse me, I need to rinse my mouth out. Oh yeah, okay. So the problem with nori is that it is generally soaked in oil, and that oil can go rancid real fast. Oh my God, I'm glad, really glad we didn't add that to the Dalkgalbi. If we'd added this rancid nori to this dish, it would have been ruined. There would be no recovering it. None. Ah, God, it's so nasty. Ah, rancid oil. And you know that oil is really rancid if it tastes that way, because a lot of polyunsaturated fat oils will go rancid without you even knowing it. Oh gosh, I bet all of these are therefore rancid. Damn. Damn. Well, let me check. Bring this in. Probably true though. Oh yeah. Oh. God, I feel like I need a detox just from inhaling this. Okay, well, so normally you would add flavor enhancing strips of nori into this. I am not going to ruin my bokkeumbap by doing that, however. So this is the problem with polyunsaturated fat oils. So this is a good time for a food chemistry lesson, food science. So polyunsaturated fats are called that because they have multiple, on a molecule, on the fat molecule, there are actually multiple spots that are open for other things to bond to it, right, on the fatty acid chain. Saturated fat means there's no openings, there's nothing else that can bond with it. That's the most stable because there are no holes, so to say, in your fatty acid chain. Monounsaturated, like olive oil, is one step down in terms of stability from a saturated fat because there's only one opening on the fatty acid chain. Polyunsaturated fats, though, have multiple openings. Openings, which means that there's lots of, that it's the least stable fat and it will go rancid much sooner, and especially under exposure from heat. Now, this nori has not been exposed to heat, but it doesn't seem to matter because it's super duper rancid. And polyunsaturated fat oils can be rancid for us in terms of how they affect our body and not yet smell rancid. So that's the other problem with using seed oils. when you don't store them properly. So if you have, say, sesame oil, you should store it in the fridge because it is a polyunsaturated fat. Olive oil should be stored in a dark, cool place. It's monounsaturated, so it will take longer to go rancid, but it will eventually go rancid. Saturated fats almost never go rancid. It takes a lot of effort to make a saturated fat go rancid. You need to expose it to really high heat to make a saturated fat go rancid, like cooking, for instance. Okay, so we will not be putting any nori in this because I don't want to ruin my dish. So instead, we're just going to add rice and sesame oil. If I had carrots, I would add some carrot strips. Some people will add more, and actually maybe I'll go ahead and add some of the, oh, I forgot to add, crap. Okay. I forgot to add, I got talking to you and I forgot to add some key ingredients here. Okay, so I forgot to add some of my, I forgot to add the perilla leaves, so I'm going to add that now, and we forgot to add these green onions in at the end. So I'm just going to go ahead and heat that up, and I'm going to go ahead and put rice in here, and we're just going to fry that all together. So we just put in some rice. I prefer a lower ratio of rice to thing, but in Korea, they'll put a very little bit of Dalkgalbi and a whole lot of rice. I prefer the opposite ratio. Go ahead and add some sesame oil here. Let me see. Okay, let me see. Oh, naengmyeon and japchae. Yeah, naengmyeon and japchae I think are also pretty, well, japchae is a pretty good one, especially for people who might need a gentle introduction to Korean food. And naengmyeon, of course, is, you know, a fantastic summer dish. Yeah, I'm really impressed, Stargazer. You've been exposed to a lot more Korean dishes, a lot of variety of Korean dishes. Do you have a large Korean community where you live? Oh, mushrooms. Mushrooms are not typically added to this dish, interestingly, Susan. Mushrooms are not part of this stir fry for whatever reason. And it could be because in Chuncheon, mushrooms are not grown, maybe mushrooms are not native to Chuncheon, so it wasn't considered something to be added to this dish. Mushrooms are also considered a bit of a, this is going to sound strange, but they're kind of a bit of a luxury item. Whereas goguma, sweet potatoes, and, you know, green onions and tteokbokki and chicken are not, right? And perilla leaves are literally a weed. They grow everywhere. They will grow in a tiny patch of dirt surrounded by loud streets and pollution, and they will still grow. Okay, so I've added and you also add a little bit more of your marinade, and this is why it's a good idea to save some marinade for the bokkeumbap process. Right. Well, there are multiple places, but I also study a lot. So then, of course, I want to try the food. Aha. Well, so my problem, people always ask me, when I visit the US, people say, oh, do you want to go out for Korean food? And I say, no, absolutely not. And some people think it's because, you know, I'm so tired of Korean food that I don't want it anymore. No, not at all. Love Korean food. But Korean restaurants, your average Korean restaurant in the US these days isn't even owned or operated by a Korean. And they're generally, the food that they serve is not true Korean food. It's often been diluted or mutated to suit an American audience or a Western audience, and that's not Korean food to me. I'm not interested in that. And or it's all it's Korean barbecue and bibimbap and bulgogi. But there's so many better dishes in Korea than that almost are very rarely ever served in your average Korean restaurant in the US. So there's a lot of reasons I'm generally not interested in Korean food when I go to the US. And it's not snobbery, it's just that's not what I've come to expect from Korean food. I also went to a Korean restaurant once in the US where they tried to charge me for refills on kimchi. You do not charge for banchan refills at a Korean restaurant. That's heresy, right? The banchan are supposed to be unlimited, all you can eat included in the price. I was so offended. I will never ever go back to that restaurant again. I actually looked at the woman and I said, "You want to charge me for kimchi?" And she kind of backed down because she realized that I knew that that is not normal in a Korean restaurant. And she said, "Well, I won't charge you for this one refill, but after this, I'm going to charge you." I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm never coming back here again." Charging for refills on kimchi. I mean, really. Okay, so now that, you know, everything is kind of stir-fried all together, now we just, what they do is they kind of scrape all of the rice and ingredients into this kind of pile, like a little ziggurat, like the bottom tier of a ziggurat, right? And they actually then pack it together into a kind of patty, basically, and they just let that fry so that you get that fantastic Maillard reaction on the bottom of the rice. Because you've got the starch from the rice, then you've got the fat from the oils from the sesame oil, and also the fat from the chicken skin on the thighs. And you've got the flavoring components, the sugars and the salts and amino acids from the meat. And all of that is going to mix together to make a super, super yummy thing on the bottom here. Now, if we'd added cheese to our Dalk Galbi, which is a traditional accompaniment, that would also be all mixed in here. So super delicious, super, super, super delicious. And of course, if we had the nori, nori is nutritionally dense. It also has a lot of flavor enhancing properties, right? So it has glutamates. Nori kim, as it's called in Korean, has glutamates. And just like our soy sauce, those glutamates, or tomatoes even have glutamates as well. Those glutamates are flavor enhancers. That is the umami flavor. That is the source of umami. Okay, let me see. Some places are just like that. I try to avoid it as best I can. I just want authentic stuff, even if I can't travel. Well, Stargazer, I've told you, you always have a room with me, right? If you want to visit Korea, I am happy to show you around. Get your passport. That's my biggest travel advice, is get your passport. Have your passport, have a valid passport always, because you never know when you might decide you want to get out there and travel. And so you just want to have that passport ready to go. Oh, travel tip, everyone, passport validity. Different countries have different requirements on passport validity, by which I mean some countries will not let you into the country if your passport is going to expire within, say, 6 months. So if it's March and your passport expires in September, there are countries that will refuse you at the border, and you will have to get on the plane and go back at your own expense. So when you're traveling to a foreign country and your passport is getting close-ish, just make sure that before you leave that your passport has a long enough period of validity to actually, you know, allow you into the country. This is fresh on my mind because I'm actually getting to the point where we might run into some issues. So I need to go ahead and initiate the renewal of my passport. I'm going to do that at the embassy in Seoul, probably. Yeah, there it is. The other reason that I want to do my passport renewal at the embassy in Seoul is because there is a crazy backup on passport renewals in the US. But if you're here in Korea, it goes real fast because they do them here. So we don't run into the issues of the Trump administration having eviscerated the government that's in the US. They don't have the same challenges here. So yeah. Okay. So this is it. We have our, where'd the Dalk Galbi go? We have our Dalk Galbi. Oh, wait, one last little bit. Now this is something that you don't always see necessarily, but I like to sprinkle some sesame seeds on top, like so. So that's the Dalk Galbi. And then here we have our bokkeumbap, which again is frequently eaten either straight from the pan sometimes, in fact, as a communal thing, or you can do it with leaf wraps. Okay. God, that tastes really good. Okay, everyone. Are there any questions about our today's show? Any final questions or comments? And as always, I'm not going to leave all of this flavor that has built up here. I mean, look at that. Can you imagine? Can you imagine taking that yummy brown flavor that's like fat and rice starch and flavors and just throwing that away? Uh-uh. Not in my kitchen, damn it. Any final questions or comments about Dalk Galbi? Our next cooking from around the world, I think, is going to be Persia. Now, I have not been to Persia, but I love Persian cuisine. And I have not been to Iran, as it's called now, right? And that's for reasons, namely having to do with my passport. So, yeah. But I love Persian cuisine, and I desperately want to go to Iran, and I want to see all of those amazing historic sites. I want to meet the people. I want to experience the culture and the food, and, you know, so it is on my list of places I desperately want to go. And in the meanwhile, the only way I can really experience it is through the food. So I think our next cooking from around the world is probably going to be Persian, and it's probably going to be Zabzi Gourmet, possibly. Yep. Yeah, it tastes good. This definitely tastes super yummy. It is especially the brown bits that I'm now patiently scraping off of the bottom of the pan. Yeah, super yummy. You literally cannot buy this, these flavor chunks. See, look at all that yummy brown that I just scraped off. That's just waiting to be incorporated back into the dish. Okay, well, everyone. Any final questions or comments? And let me know if you have requests for cuisines or dishes you would like me to explore for future cooking from around the world. I will happily incorporate that into into our schedule of things to make. Oh yeah, that's super cool. Stargazer, you've got friends from around the world. Nice. Yeah, it's very nice having friends from around the world. Also, I'm sorry about Venezuela. Have you expressed our apologies for our current actions in Venezuela, which are complete bullshit, by the way? I tell you, I often wake up in apprehension as to what the news is going to tell me we have now done wrong this time. It's great. It's fantastic. We live in such horrifying times. Okay. Yeah. So for my patrons and channel members, and if you are one of my patrons or channel members, you have access to my Creative Contessa Discord. I will be sharing this recipe there so that if you want to make this on your own, you can do so with the actual measurements, maybe in accompanying watching the recording for step-by-step guidance if you like. Yeah. Yeah, see, like, yeah, Stargazer, I'm 100% with you. Like, Maduro is a piece of garbage on his own, right? I mean, yeah, but on the other hand, what gives us the right to go and kidnap other people's presidents? That kind of, if the golden rule kind of stuff, that means that countries should be able to come and take our presidents with their special forces, I guess. So yeah. Yeah. Yeah, God damn it, there does seem to be no end to it, right? Yeah. Yeah, like I'm not saying, you know, Maduro ignored the results of the last election, right? And that's garbage. So I definitely do not support him as a general politician or leader. But you know, what gives us the right? And I know some assholes will say, well, might makes right, but I don't want to live in a world where might makes right, frankly. That is not the kind of world in which I care to exist. So I'd rather that not be a reason for doing something. Yeah, veto this Cheeto, like, oh my God, yeah, seriously, no kidding. It's rough. I mean, our government's a hot mess. Our government is basically, it all started going downhill with Reagan, and it really took a very sharp turn down with Citizens United, which gave corporations the right to throw as much money at elections and politicians as they care to in the name of a free speech, right? The second corporations were able to buy their way into politicians' policies that way, I mean, it's bribery. fucking bribery, excuse my language. That means that any politician who wants to actually get elected will be beholden to corporations, because otherwise they won't have the money that they need to actually get elected. So yeah, it's horseshit. It's a mess. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I'll just say, so I'm from Delaware, and President Biden is from Delaware, and my family worked on many of his campaigns across the decades. And, you know, we actually know him as a person. He's actually a good person. And I didn't necessarily support all the decisions he made as president, but none of them made me hang my head in abject shame. And we stood up to dictators under President Biden. So that's important to me as well. Yeah. Yeah, he was mostly, yeah, he had to spend years cleaning up Trump's mess. And our economy was actually doing pretty well at the end of his cycle, but the news made it look like it wasn't, which was bullshit. But now people are finding out that just how good things actually were over a little over a year ago, or just about a year ago. Okay, anyway, this is not a politics channel. Sorry, everyone. Trying not to wander down that lane. Okay, well, Stargazer and Susan, I really appreciate your active participation in the live stream today. It made me feel not so alone. Hopefully we can grow this segment and make it more popular as we go along. So if you get a chance, once it posts, if you can just leave a little comment that boosts the algorithm, blah, blah, you ladies know how it works. Yeah, no, Stargazer, I'm wishing I had a second passport. So badly, I wish I had a second passport. Yeah, I wish I had a second passport and a third passport and a fourth passport. Oh, well, I missed that opportunity to get my German citizenship when I was there, and I'm kind of wishing I had now. Never thought I'd say that. I never thought I'd say that, but that's where we're at. Okay, everyone, if you're watching this as a recording, don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. I'd like to thank my channel members and Patreons for supporting my work. And I'd like to thank my community like Susan and Stargazer, who come out and participate in the chats and watch all the things and interact with me, sometimes in person even, right? Okay, everyone, until next time, may your travel adventures be creative and unplanned. Annyeong!